reconvene the meeting. The next item that we have on the agenda is the reorganization of the board. How we will do this is I will go through each position asking for nominations for each of the 3 positions that need filled. We won't race to see who can get it out first. If there's multiple nominations for the same position, that's fine. We'll vote then on the nominations that we have. We will start with the chairman of the board of, oh, and I should make this clear, it's just for the board members to elect the chair, not for the public. Do I have a nomination from the board for chairman of the Board of Selectmen?
I nominate Ken Robinson.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any other nominations for the position of chairman of the Board of Selectmen? Hearing no other nominations, we will vote. Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I know we have a tough road ahead, and I look forward to working with everyone to move forward. The next position that we have is the vice chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Do I have a nomination?
I make a motion to nominate John Columbus for vice chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, we can vote. Julie? Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
That is 3 yeses. Our next position is for the clerk. Do I have a nomination from the board to fill the position of clerk of the Board of Selectmen?
I make a motion to nominate Doug Morrison as clerk.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any other nominations for the position of clerk? If not, we'll vote. Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So there are the 3 positions that we have filled, and those positions will become effective immediately. The next item that we have on our agenda is a town administrator report, which will be presented by our interim town administrator, Bob Markle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to thank State Representative Denise Andrews for coming tonight to hear about our circumstance financially. We've been trying to work with her office, well, the office of Senator Brewer, get state support for the efforts we're making.
Let me just describe the circumstances that have led up to the current situation and the budget that we are going to present tonight. The town learned, I guess in late fall, early winter, that there was a $505,000 gap in the budget for the current fiscal year, fiscal 2014. The Board of Selectmen voted on January the 27th to ask all department heads to make a 5% cut in their spending. We figured that that would produce about $150,000 in savings. I arrived in early February, and in discussions with the Board of Selectmen, we came up with a strategy for closing the gap. I'll call that strategy 1. That was to use free cash plus the cuts, the $150,000 in cuts, maybe some of the town's reserve if necessary, call a special town meeting and close the gap. This hinged on free cash, and I'm sure a lot of you know the town had a problem in closing out the prior fiscal year, the fiscal year 13 that ended July 30th, 2013. In order to close your fiscal year, you have to present data to the Department of Revenue that shows your numbers for your budget for the year and other information regarding your debt schedule and so forth. And as I'm sure everybody knows, the financial management system of the town was in disarray, and good data was not available that could be submitted to the Department of Revenue to allow us to close out fiscal 13. The importance of closing out 13 was that at the very end of the process, the Department of Revenue certifies free cash. Free cash is, in a nutshell, the accumulated surplus revenues and unexpended funds from the prior year and basically all prior years. It's your accumulated surplus. Now, the town was fortunate during the decade prior to this one in that we were getting free cash certified at one time in 2010, $800,000. And it wasn't common to see $500,000, $600,000. And so when I came here in February, the message was, let's fix the books, get the information to the DOR office in Springfield, close out 13, and get free cash certified, and then we could close the budget gap. It might have required $350,000 in free cash, but we thought, oh, that's not a problem. We'll have an abundance of free cash as the town has had in the past. It's not sound financial policy to use free cash to plug a hole in your operating budget. It's the wrong thing to do. But in an emergency, and that's what we had, we figured this is the least harsh option right now to keep the town moving forward. Okay, strategy number one, what happened? Well, you may know that we got a letter from the Department of Revenue in early March saying, if you don't supply us with Schedule A, which is one of the two forms that we have to file every year, we're going to cut off your state aid. And so we had the deadline there, which we met. The deadline for filing that information and basically completing what we were required to complete for fiscal 13, we got it in, I think, exactly on March 14th when they required it. And we sat and waited to hear what the free cash would be. In the meantime, a special town meeting was scheduled. That was the plan. Get free cash, go in, close the gap. On March 28th, one day, one afternoon before the special town meeting, the letter came out from the DOR that said, not only do you not have any free cash, you've got a deficit of $26,000. And I have to say, I'm sure we were all shocked. I was shocked. I never expected that, but that's the problem when you use free cash for your operating budget. You're not assured of it. Strategy one failed. It wouldn't work. And so strategy two came out at the March 29th special town meeting. If we can't do it ourselves, let's ask for a general override of the Proposition 2.5 tax cap. So if you're at the March 29th meeting, selectmen, and the meeting itself voted, I believe, 224 to 49, in favor of an election for a general override of the tax cap for $505,000. The election was scheduled, the ballot was put on the town election for May 5th, last Monday, in order not to spend money for another election. Simultaneously, we were working on a third strategy, and that is, and this came out of discussions that I had with Jerry Perry at the Department of Revenue. He said, if your override fails, there will be state intervention. If you can't figure out a way to solve the problem, we will intervene. It's illegal not to have a balanced budget in Massachusetts. And so we have to bail you out, in effect. So we will prepare deficit legislation for submission right after your override. And if it fails, we go into the legislature, ask them to approve it, and as it goes through the House and the Senate, signed by the governor, we'll give you a loan for 5 years to cover part of your gap. We're not going to cover all of it. They said you have to cut your $150. You got to take those 150 in cuts, implement that, and we'll give you 350. And you got to pay it back over 5 years. And that's going to be roughly $80,000 a year that the town would have to pay in interest and in principal. By the way, the FY15 budget doesn't allow that, doesn't provide for that $80,000. So we have strategy number 2 and strategy number 3 moving down separate tracks simultaneously. The override failed. What was it, 789 to 666? Not bad, but the voters have spoken, and in a democracy you have to listen to the voters. The override proposal lost on Monday of this week, and I was on the phone with Jerry Perry on Tuesday morning and said, let's go with Plan 3 now. And he said to me, you know what? He said, I understand you have a new crisis emerging, and it's a really important one. And so, again, conditions change, and we're trying to adjust to them. And yes, I was aware of it. I was told about 2 weeks ago by our town accountant that the town will run out of cash on or about June 13th. We have a cash flow problem. Why? Well, we haven't set the tax rate this year, and we haven't been able to legally send out tax bills for the third and the fourth quarter. You got your first and second quarter tax bills. Those are estimated. They're not official. The third and fourth quarter are typically sent out after you set your tax rate, most towns in November or December. So no tax rate, no tax bills, no money coming in. This was figured out earlier this year, and the town went out and borrowed $2.65 million on a short-term note to cover the cash issue. We're running out of that money, and Matt is going to try and roll it over. And one of the rules of the Department of Revenue is if you propose an override and you've got a note outstanding, and this is a State House note, in other words, we're borrowing it from the state, not from a bank, and the override goes down, we will not allow you to borrow as much if you need to roll it over. So we can't get 2.65. I have to say, in the conversation with Mr. Perry, he said, okay, we'll waive that. We know you're strapped for cash. If we can't pay our bills on June 13th because we have no cash, that means we can't meet payroll. That means we can't pay vendors. And most importantly, we may not be able to pay we may not be able to make a debt payment on June the 15th, which comes due. That would mean default. That simply cannot happen. You can't have default. I'm not aware of a city or a town that's defaulted in Massachusetts since the 30s. The state would then really step in. They wouldn't allow that because not only does that ruin the town's bond rating for our lifetime, it would ruin the state's bond rating to allow any municipality to default on a loan. So this new crisis just popped up in the last couple of weeks, or at least we became aware of it. Matt didn't know this, and he sat down one day and did an analysis of all the cash that we can anticipate and all the obligations that we had. Roughly $3 million in obligations, roughly $2 million in cash that he could see available between now and the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. That gets us to where we are right now. In the conversation I had with the Department of Revenue, he said to me, you need to get tax bills in the mail. The only way you can solve your cash flow problem, get your tax bills out there, get tax dollars into the Treasury. He said, you got to do that soon. And then we talked about the legislation process, and I said, well, how long is that going to take? He says, well, the Senate's pinned down right now with the state budget. You're looking a couple to 3 weeks, and you're looking maybe not getting your tax bills out until early June if you go the state route with the loan and the deficit legislation. He said, that probably won't work for you. He said, we'll do our best to try and get it through the legislature and do this quickly, but actually 2 to 3 weeks would be quick. And he said, strategy number 3 doesn't seem to be working well for you. He said, I suggest that if there's any way you can do it, you need to bite the bullet and you need to make the cuts in your operating budgets now that cover the shortfall of $505,000. We'll certify your tax rate as soon as you show us you've made the cuts, and get your tax bills out there so you don't have the cash flow problem in June. That's how we got here. This budget, which I guess we passed around, is a poison pill. It is harsh. It includes layoffs now, and it includes service cuts. The town will barely operate its services for the next 7 weeks if this budget is approved. We have a budget. The budget reductions here of $500,000 are approved. I think we have no other choice. I don't know of any other options right now. This is the harshest option. The other options that were less harsh have failed us for reasons beyond our control, for the most part. And so I'm recommending this to the Board of Selection, Board of, what are you, Selectmen? Yes. Recommending this as the only, we are backed into a corner. It's the only option we have. It is a very, very bitter pill, and it means 7 weeks until we get into July 1 in the new fiscal year, where you will see, you'll notice that we will not have services available that you typically want and rely upon. I met with the department heads today at 1 o'clock, and we discussed it. No one's happy. I think they understand that we have to face reality and do this, or it will all be worse. It'll be worse if we don't. We're at the bottom. All that I can say on the positive side is that if we can endure this, fiscal 15 that starts July 1st will be somewhat better. It'll still be an austere budget, but some of the people who are going to be furloughed, meaning they'll be brought back July 1, some are going to be laid off, some are going to be furloughed and be brought back. But even the 15 budget has a $505,000 hole that the advisory board has to face when they prepared the FY15 budget. I think that sums up where we are, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I would like to even add one caveat to that. I know that Mr. Merkel had said that we were at the bottom. I do believe that there is a place lower that we can go, and that would be to default, which cannot happen. I mean, cities generally declare bankruptcy before and go under federal protection before they allow themselves to default on municipal bonds. And in addition to that, not only, I know that that's something that I've heard a lot, well, if we can keep people in jobs now and hopefully get the money in time so we don't default, then we'll deal with the problem next fiscal year. The problem is, as Bob said, we still have that $505,000 gap, plus we need to lay off more people permanently to make up that $80,000 a year debt service that we will have to the state for the next 5 years. So there is some place lower we can go. It's having to make more layoffs next year, fiscal year, of to cover the $80,000, plus the unemployment benefits of laying off the people to cover that amount of money. So the option, I know that there were many people, I believe, and I've heard, that voted no because they thought, oh, the state's going to come in and fix our problems. My personal perspective is that the state has made it pretty clear that they don't want our problems, and they are not, they do not think that their services would be helpful to our community. So
Before you dig into this,
Yeah, sure.
just one more thing. Every municipal department is affected by these cuts. No department was spared, from the Selectman's office to the Recreation Department. Every municipal department was cut, and cut severely. That's it.
Do any of the selectmen have any comments before I open it up to general public comment?
I mean, the only thing I would really like to add is that taking the state route, the biggest risk with that is that it takes longer to get it approved than the 3 weeks that, the DOR is telling us, which putting the tax bills out late, which means we don't have the cash and we can't make the bond payment. If that happens, then we're going to, really be up the creek without a boat or a paddle. So that's certainly a worse option. In addition, even if it does come through and we add that additional $80,000 in debt, it's just going to make it that much more difficult for the next 5 years. So I do think that taking this option and making the cuts now, as painful as it's going to be, and I'm sorry for all of the employees that are going to feel the pain, it's the right thing to do.
Anybody else want to? Yeah, sure.
I wasn't here at the meeting on Tuesday. I was in Washington, and it's just depressing news all around, unfortunately. I feel bad for the employees. I feel bad for the people in town who couldn't afford to vote yes for the override. There's no other way out of this situation at this point in time. I wasn't at the meeting because when I left, I thought it was going to be a tax classification hearing either way. And those usually, sorry, Luann, they usually take about 15 minutes. So I apologize for not being here for that meeting. But I am here for this one, and we're doing the best that we can with what we have. And when we try to make decisions based on inaccurate or information that isn't fully complete, we end up making bad decisions. And now we're backed right up against the wall. And unfortunately, it's our employees who pay the price.
Comments from selectmen before I open it up to general? Yes.
We took the 911, the reverse, and I thought that was good because they asked if people would go in and try to pay toward their taxes. Did a lot of people show up? Did any people show up?
Is,
$33,000 a day, right?
It's a start.
It's up to 73.
It's a start.
yes.
I got three things. One, is the school going to take a hit? No? Two,
They're at the end of their year, I met with the superintendent.
two,
There's
from what you're all saying, we're broke. In essence, we're broke.
Right.
Three, if we're broke, how can you sit there and contemplate hiring someone as a town manager? We got 5 selectmen. Selectmen have been elected to run the town. Town manager hasn't been elected to run the town. You have. You're not doing it. You're not doing it. And you should be.
I can say from a logistical standpoint, it would be impossible, literally impossible, we don't have access to the DOR, they don't give access to an entire board, to DOR databases, spreadsheets, to be able to enter information. And remember, we're not allowed to meet or talk outside of an open meeting. So if an employee has a question that, our furnace blew today, can we have the money to fix it out of this line item? We would say, well, we have a scheduled meeting in 2 weeks, so when we get together in 2 weeks, we can discuss that topic. Because we are not allowed to direct employees outside of a meeting, an open meeting. We're not allowed to discuss it, a quorum of us together, any issue. So it would be impossible for us, acting as 5 little mayors, to be directing people in the town. Also, I would add to that, a big part of why we're in this problem is because we had a town coordinator for so long. In this century, you cannot run a town, a budget the size of ours, without someone who can tell department heads what to do. So if the treasurer or any department, an accountant, council on aging director, just doesn't show up to work for 2 weeks, there's no one to hold that person accountable until we have a meeting. There is no one, if a treasurer doesn't get, or an accountant, doesn't get the books done when they're supposed to, there was no one there to tell that person, do them or you're fired. Because we can't do that every time there's a problem. We used to get tons of emails, I'm not talking about the treasurer position in general, but just a variety of positions. We get CC'd on emails all the time about problems that departments are having and the frustration, and I'm sure many employees and department heads can speak to this, the frustration that they would have when they would email Mr. Ritter, and it's not Mr. Ritter's fault, it's the power that he had, email a question. I can't get this department head to do this, what I need to do, or I can't get this done, or this has burned out and I don't have the authority to expend the money to fix it. And Mr. Ritter would say, I'll put it on the agenda, because there was no one there to lead the town. And when we offer leadership, we offer guidance. We don't act as the managers that run day-to-day operations in the office, because it would be impossible under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with open meeting law requirements to do that.
Mr. Chairman, this town has operated for somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 years, run by the Board of Selectmen. They have done it without town managers. Now, you forget...
Here's where we are, I would say.
You forget that if you have a problem, if that furnace goes out, there's such a thing as an emergency meeting. There are things you can do. The point is, the selectmen are not doing their job. They're hiring somebody to do their work, and that's wrong.
That's what every other town and community in the Commonwealth does.
I don't agree with you.
Well, here's what I will also say. This town also ran, and I don't mean this flippantly, but to make a pretty close comparison, this town also ran without cars and electricity for 200 years, and if we shut off everyone's lights and took away their car keys, I think we would have problems as well. We are in this, it is this era, this century, with all of the rules and regulations that come down on us, just like you hear this, the schools say this as well. There are so many reports that who's going to file the Schedule A?
Mr. Chairman, you're not addressing the problem. The problem is here, now.
Right, yes.
And you're not addressing it.
Excuse me, but wasn't it the voice of the townspeople that, in this town, at a town meeting, that voted for a town administrator?
Yes. So to add to that, it's not okay, so excuse me, we'll have order here. We're not, this is done, and if there's another point that we want to get back to, there was a whole room full of employees that are about to lose their jobs that I would like to give the opportunity to speak rather than continue this discussion. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One in fact, maybe we should wait until the employees have had their turn. But my understanding is you said layoffs and furloughs. And I had it explained that a furlough means that they will be without a job for a certain period of time until the next fiscal year, until July 1st. However, while they will be collecting unemployment insurance, the benefits provided by the town will continue, and they are, I guess one mustn't say guaranteed, that perhaps is a bit optimistic, but that there should be a job for people to come back to on July 1st. That's one question or comment, however you want to put it. Whereas people that are laid off will lose their benefits. They will obviously have some unemployment, and the town makes a contribution to that. And I just wondered if somebody could respond to that, please.
Town administrator.
Ma'am, we are looking at a combination of furloughs and, unfortunately, layoffs. The reason for the layoffs, which, and you're correct, that means the employee does not come back on July the 1st. Reason for that is that the fiscal 15 budget is austere, and The only way to make ends meet is to reduce the staff. It doesn't work otherwise because the town has a spending plan this year that exceeds revenues. It's the same next year. And so next year, while we're going to make cuts this year, similar cuts, not complete, but similar cuts will be required in the fiscal 15 budget in order to make ends meet and have a balanced budget. So those who are not coming back in July will be laid off. Those who are coming back in July are going to be furloughed. And you're correct about the benefit packages. And this is just the reality. We're going to certainly work on the 15 budget, and you do get a 2.5% boost in your revenue, and there's going to be some additional state aid versus what the governor had in his budget that he released in January. So there are going to be some additional sums of money that will be available next year. There's also additional fixed costs, health insurance, we have school assessments and so forth, so it's almost a wash. And so the problem that we have this year is the problem we have next year, and that is about $500,000 short on revenue. And as a result of that, there will be some permanent layoffs. And I don't know of any option to that. I sure didn't come here to lay people off and slash services. This is about as disagreeable as it gets.
And I would also like to say as well that the cuts that are in here, when it's posted, and we'll make sure once it's voted that it's posted tomorrow, because we didn't know how many people would be here. We didn't want to waste paper given that. But there are a lot of the numbers, they're round numbers. We are not micromanaging the departments to the point of saying, okay, you need to cut this person, and this person. This is looking at your budget. This is, if we cut this much, can you operate? Can you, and in some cases, no, they won't be operating. But given that fact that we're not, employees that are laid off on Monday will not likely know, well, they definitely won't know for sure which employees are coming back and which aren't, because the fiscal year, we know what we proposed in our budget, or excuse me, in the advisory board's budget. We haven't voted on it yet, but we know what is proposed in the fiscal year 15 budget, but until it's on town meeting floor and voted, we don't know. So someone could get up and offer a motion and say, I think that we should make all the cuts to the police and give all the money to the highway department, and if that passes, then none of the police officers will be coming back, and highway, that kind of situation could happen. So we don't know with a surety even which employees will be individually able to come back and which ones won't. We know we can make a general guess, but we don't know. It's up to the department heads to make that decision in line with union contracts or in their discretion, basically.
And
Sure.
I had a second question, and this, I believe, I'd like to direct this to Doug Morrison, and it was something that you said last night. There was a little meeting over at the COA building, it's under construction, and that was that at this point, the construction will continue only until that time that the materials that have already been purchased and are on site, that the construction itself will continue until those have been depleted. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, surely the town voted the money for the construction of the COA, and that, I assume, that money is stuck in a little account, I don't know, a piggy bank or an account or something somewhere, so that the funds for that COA building should continue to exist, that you can't take that funds and use it to pay other town expenses. So I just wonder if Doug could clarify that, why there won't be money to continue and complete the project. There might not be money to pay a staff, it might sit there empty, but I can't quite understand why the building itself can't be completed.
I can explain what was explained to me by the accountant. What was explained to me is that when a debt exclusion occurs, that it gets put into an account in the general ledger. As far as the bank goes, there can be an account set up for the bank, which then that cash can go into, or the cash can just go into the general bank account. When the senior center debt exclusion was approved, the accountant at the time chose to put the cash into the general bank account.
Bad
So,
idea.
in the general ledger, the debt exclusion is there, and the money is in the general ledger. But in the physical bank account, because that cash was put in with all of the other cash, the cash is now used to support the operating budget of the town.
But that's not what the folks voted for.
Right, but it was the way it was set up. Now, the current accountant said that it's not unusual, because typically a town doesn't run cash strapped like we're running right now. As long as you've got money in the bank, it doesn't matter because you can pay the bills out of the account. And again, the money is still sitting in the general ledger. And once we start receiving tax revenue in and that money goes back into the general bank account, the money will be there to continue the project. But it's just temporarily unavailable to spend.
All right, so the money will be there, and you don't have a little corner you could tuck it in so that it's not spent on frivolities?
That would be something the accountant would have to answer. I don't know that they can change it now that it was established 3 or 4 years ago, however it was.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Forgive me if this is clear to everyone else, but I'm looking for some clarification. The default date of June the 15th, that is based on the $2.65 million loan.
No, that's,
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's debt service. The $2.65 million note is due on May 15th. It'll be rolled over. No, we're going to reborrow. But state regulation is that because we need cash, you need to close out any temporary borrowing by the end of the fiscal year. The June 15th debt payment is on bond. And that's, I guess, the most serious issue that we have at this point.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I think I saw some other hands. Oh, sorry, yes, sir.
Can a reduced budget be accepted by the selectmen now without a town meeting?
So how the process works is, so we are not amending the budget right now. We're not changing. That will have to happen within the special, within the annual town meeting on the 7th. There's a special in there. And in that special is when the town will have to vote on it. When the budget is set, that and appropriations are made, that sets a maximum level of spending that we can do. So we can't spend any more than $100,000 for the treasurer's office if that's what is decided. We can spend less, so we don't have to spend. The budget is the maximum that you can spend, not the minimum. So we, as the executive branch of government, when we execute that budget, can direct department heads to stop spending at this level and freeze the spending, but the actual change to the budget won't happen until we get to town meeting. However, the DOR has made it clear to us that these steps, if we do this tonight, if my understanding is correct, tomorrow we can tell them that this passed and they will let us set a tax rate, correct? Or let us...
That's the phone call tomorrow morning.
Okay.
If you agree to this tonight, I'm going to urge the DOR to allow us to set a tax rate and consider our budget balance. I have a concern, and Mr. Perry is going to say the only way we can do that is when we get a certified letter from the clerk that the budget has been officially cut by the town meeting on the 17th of May. I'm going to try and get him to be flexible about that, but at the worst case would be, he said, no, you're going to have to get me the certification that we did make the cuts at town meeting, in which case we wouldn't be able to get tax bills out until probably, tee it up, maybe get them out on the 19th. That's still better than waiting until the end of the month, because money will start to come in.
But the problem with waiting until the 17th to actually make the cuts is, if you think we have, 7 weeks to cut 505,000, if we have 4.5 or 5 weeks to make those same cuts, I don't even know if it would be possible to stop spending enough money to come up with that money in that short period. Yes?
I think there's still an underlying problem with financial accountability in the town, because I never understood the 505,000. I know in January, the selectmen asked for a percentage cut that would reduce it, yet the number stays at 505. And I know we have a new financial team, and we were assured that everything would be okay. And now it seems that a cash flow problem was not identified until 2 weeks ago. I know when I went to the polls, well, I voted for the OI, so it doesn't matter, but I don't know how many people that went to the polls knew there was a cash flow problem, and I don't know why, if there was a cash flow problem, it wasn't identified earlier and brought to people's attention. And I think a lot of people would vote for the override if they had more information and felt good about the numbers in front of them. But it seems every 2 weeks or every month, the situation changes, and, well, we didn't understand this, and this was based on that, and until we get some real upfront information for the voters, there's a lack of credibility, and people are going to say, I'm not sure that I trust what's going on.
I appreciate what you're saying, sir. I would say this. There is a first-rate team now managing the town's finances in our accounting office, treasurer's office, and collector's office. When they first got underway, the crisis was, let's close out fiscal 13. Well, we can't do that until we do cash reconciliation and we fix the general ledger. So they were focused on that almost exclusively, because there were demands every day from me and others. We need to get this done. And so they approached this methodically. Once they completed work on fiscal 13, did the Schedule A, then the next step was fiscal 14. We found out that cash reconciliation in fiscal 14 had not been done since last August. And so the accountant was working on that, and also at the same time reconciling with the general ledger. He finally got that squared away, and then on his own, he went out and did a projection and an analysis of where we were with cash. And he came to me, it was about 2 weeks ago, and we didn't have the information. There is a catching up that has to be done. It is being done, but I mean, he works for us 20 hours a week, and there are limits as to how much can get done in that time. I've watched carefully. He's a CPA. It's a very professional operation right now, and we're getting there. And I'm confident that by the end of this month, that the town's financial records will be up to date, they will be accurate, they will be acceptable by the state, and we will not have these problems going forward, as long as we maintain a professional operation there. I can't say more than that. I do know that no one goofs off there, and they're working hard to do it. I get periodic reports. He reports to the Board of Selectmen, and we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet.
And if I could just follow up too, and I've said this before, so I apologize for those that have heard me say this a million times. I'm not standing up here and saying that we know how much is in every account, because we don't. When Bob came, and he said this at a public meeting before, so I'll repeat it, that when he came, our books were some of the worst he has ever seen in 32 years, correct? I mean, a mess, a disaster. You can't fix that in 2 weeks. So the fact that we're finding problems is a good indicator to me that we're actually doing the work. If we had this disaster and then all of a sudden, oh, yeah, this would be this huge disaster, but everything's fine now, and nothing else cropped up, I think that would be an indication that things were being swept under the rug. So I think that we are giving you as much information as we have. We are not holding anything back. But the problem is someone had asked, well, what's, up to department heads can verify this. Well, a lot of the department heads have a better idea of what's in their accounts in some cases than we do, because the books were just such a mess. That's one of the byproducts of having 5 treasurers in 3 years, and such a high turnover rate in a lot of these positions, is that there's no one there to really ask. So if the current individual in any particular position had a question, how did this get done? Instead of just, most places, you'd ask the person that had the job before or another person in the office. Most of our departments have one full-time person, or a lot of them that are involved in the budget have one full-time person. So when someone quits and someone new comes in, there's no one to ask questions of. It takes 10 times longer to do everything, and that's the position that we're in. So I believe the goal, the goal is to not be in this position, and that we will accomplish. But in terms of comparing ourselves to other towns and being where we should be, when the accountant came and gave a presentation at an open meeting before, he said that his goal is to have our Schedule A's filed on time October 1st. And that if we can do that this year, that will be a victory. We're not sitting up here saying that there will not be any more problems or that things are perfect, because we still have a ways to go. I think that sentiment that you expressed was reflected in the override vote somewhat, and so I understand it. I think that it's a valid point, and it's shared with perhaps a majority of people in town, so.
I can give you a little anecdote. About a month ago, I said to the acting treasurer, let me see the debt schedule. You know what the response was? What debt schedule? We don't have a debt schedule. Every community I know of has a schedule going out, in some cases 30 years, and each year, principal and interest that you have to pay on your bonded debt. Well, she had to call up First Southwest Bank and start it all over again by asking them, what do you know about the debts we have? That's not all. That's not all. Matt walked in recently and said, what's this from Greenfield Savings? And I said, I don't know. He said, I have no record of this other than we have to make $1,500 payments. And we found out eventually what it was, but it wasn't recorded. There's no record of it. I can keep going, but that's kind of, I would say, financial chaos that was encountered. And I'm not faulting them for not telling me about a cash problem until 2 weeks ago.
And I'm sorry, but we have two real problems here. One is that we have this deficit in our budget of $505,000. That is a result of, at its base root, we provide more services than what we can afford. That's what the bottom cause of that is. No fault, no blame. We have too many bills and not enough money coming in. That's the bottom line. Then the second issue is why we didn't know about this. And that then gets to the books and all of the other problems that we have now, and why we're in this panic mode doing something that towns don't have to do, generally. Yes?
Yes, on this sheet, on the budget actual, under the parks and cemetery, quite a drastic cut there for the superintendent's salary and the cemetery and park salary. They wiped out the whole cemetery park salary. So I know you have to make some serious cuts here, but why is this department just about decimated according to these proposed cuts?
I can answer. There was a hiring freeze established by the select board earlier in the winter. And at the point that the hiring freeze was put on, the cemetery department was prohibited from hiring 2 seasonals to do the work. And they were also missing 1 full-time employee, which they didn't hire. And so those monies have accumulated in the salary account. It doesn't so much represent decimation, but rather monies that have accumulated because there are no incumbents who are receiving salaries there. We did add more reductions there, and this gets into another area there of whether or not and how the highway department and the cemetery department are going to be working closer together. We don't like what you're seeing there. I had a conversation with the highway superintendent about an hour before I came here. We were talking about ways that we could preserve the services of the cemetery department and maybe shift some other funds around. We have to work within the bottom line of 505, but we're going to try and work on that. This budget is a working document. And we're asking for approval of the budget tonight, but we still may do a little tweaking here to preserve services as best we can. And it won't become official. The official cuts will take place at the town meeting on the 17th. So we're going to massage this a little bit more. And one of the concerns, we have two remaining concerns that we haven't addressed completely, and one is the library. Originally, it looked like we had to close it altogether. Now I think we can keep it open, barely. And the other is the cemetery department, and we are going to try to work ways with the highway department to be able to preserve as much of that as possible. You know, some of the services that the town provides can't be cut. If someone has a lot in the cemetery and they die, we can't have a moratorium on death until July 1. We have to provide service, yes. Yes.
According to the proposed reduction, $85.96 for the superintendent's salary, you're going to reduce it by $5,000. It is $50,666 in the cemetery tax salary, and you're reducing that by $50,000. It sounds to me like it's going to be eliminated, according to these numbers.
Well,
And I
can't argue that.
The question is it legal to do away with this department?
No. Well, I mean, there are regulations and laws that they have to work with. We're going to try and work more on that.
Well, and that brings my next question is that there's rules and regulations that they have to follow. And if this is done, are those rules and regulations going to be able to be followed under the highway plan?
We have to make that work.
Well, the board has to get the answers to those types of questions before they go start eliminating departments altogether.
We're not eliminating a department. I think you're mixing two issues. In the advisory board's proposed budget for fiscal year 15, there is a combination basically of departments. Now, what shape that takes or what that looks like, that's still being worked out. That's not what this is. This is for the next 7 weeks. So we are not moving offices or shifting things around. This is just stopping a lot of the services. So for instance, the parks do not have to be mowed. You know, that's done by cemetery and parks. They don't have to be mowed. There's no law that says the grass can't get longer than this in a public park. So those kinds of services can be cut. Obviously, we still have to bury people. If someone's home catches fire, somebody will come to put it out. But what we are doing is eliminating street sweeping and a lot of the other services that are important to the town and serve a function, but they're not going to be done for the next 7 weeks.
Well, my question is, the next 7 weeks, if you eliminate $50,000 from the cemetery tax salary, that leaves $666. Who's going to bury me if I die?
But no, did you hear what Bob had said, that a chunk, if you heard what Bob said, a chunk of that money that's in that account represents positions that were laid off and not filled. And the cuts that are being made to that are because Alan is, we have Alan in there. And we have, if someone needs to come over to help with the burial, they can do that with 2 people. And it's sad, but that's, if there are the highway employees that are left, since they won't be sweeping streets, they can assist as well, because we won't be able to expend money on a lot of the other services that they provide. So if anything, other departments that are people that are still here can assist with those things. We're going to have to come together. There's absolutely no 2 ways about it to make this work. But the bottom line is cash is king, and if we don't have it, there are things that we have to do according to state law. And let me tell you, the state cares a lot more about us defaulting than they do about the length of grass in any of our parks, or if our streets are swept on time, which is also required. But whether that's done this month, whether that's done in September, the state would much rather have us not default and take care of those regulations. Yes, bye.
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Columbus, we had a department head meeting today. We talked back and forth between myself and the cemetery superintendent, and as historically in the past, when he needs help, we help him. When we need help He's helped us. We've worked very good together over the years. We're going to continue to work in that direction and moving forward. So you won't have to wait.
Yes, Mr. Smart.
I just wanted to point out too that we, in this day and age, we do have a thing called a telephone. We can call help up if we need it, off from a layoff, and come in for the day to bury a problem.
Yes.
My question is, are you just taking questions from the floor, or are we going to look at this and go over it?
Yep, I'm sorry, we can,
I
yep.
was just wondering if that's what we...
Would you like me to, or would you prefer to?
We can start at the top. Board of Selectmen office is going to take a hit of every line item there except...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Yes.
not everyone has a copy of the budget.
Right, that's, we're gonna read it aloud. We don't have copies for everyone.
But open meeting law says if it's discussed in open meeting, everyone at that meeting has a right to a copy.
Right, and everyone will get a copy of it. It will be posted online tomorrow morning, what is actually voted on.
There's a gentleman, thank you.
Do you have enough money to print?
If anybody, Selectwoman Haley Brooks has one as well, an extra one.
Okay. Selectmen budget, the town coordinator, should be town administrator, goes down by $14,000 in that account. I'm going down to 1 day per week. The office salaries are going to go down $10,000. We have you had 2 people in the office. We will have 1. We have 1 right now. We think the office expenses can be trimmed. Before making these cuts, I have no doubt that there are some adjustments that are needed. Tried to talk with the people who were affected and say, what do you have coming in for bills? Where do you think we can squeeze some bucks? So we think we can cut that office expense in half from $3,000 down to $1,500. The lease, the town hall lease costs $47,500, and we have a budget of $52,000, and so we chopped $4,000 off of that. Advisory committee, well, their only funding is the reserve fund. That is a fund that is established for the advisory committee to allocate monies from this account in case of unforeseen circumstances, or unanticipated unforeseen circumstances. You know, they dole it out. If you go in there and say, oh my God, the light fell from the ceiling, and we don't have any money left in the building account, so they would provide an allocation there. So we're holding that right now because we think there will be some problems in the last 7.5 weeks getting through, and we may need to tap into that fund to deal with special problems. Town accountant, basically we made a few reductions there. The audit, now this is something I haven't spoken with the selectmen or the advisory committee about yet, but many communities will fund the prior year audit in the current year budget. The town has 17, I nicked it 2. I think we may have to use more of that and fund the audit for fiscal 14 in the fiscal 15 budget where we have funds for that. Not ideal, but it might help us to muddle through, because as we are required to make some adjustments, like, you know, in the cemetery department, to keep minimal operations going, we need to have a pot of money. And frankly, this is the only place left that I know of. where we might be able to get some money and we might be able to cover. We are going to have an audit for fiscal 14. I have an audit firm, and we're going to get a cost estimate on that, so I don't know how much it's going to cost. There are some articles on the warrant for the town meeting asking that fiscal 13 and fiscal 14 be audited. There's no appropriation for that. I don't know how we audit 13 if, in fact, the town meeting approves that, other than to take that money out of stabilization. I don't see any other way to do it. But we have to talk more about what we're doing with this audit expense, because it could be a source